Many psychologists and philosophers have known for a long time now that we are not made up of one thing. We are made up of many different subpersonalities. In society, we typically are conditioned to think that we are a single voice, that we are just one person. But when we look at this under scrutiny, we find that we are indeed made up of many different forces, all compelling us towards different directions. Carl Jung called these the autonomous complexes of the psyche. My mentor, Dr. Roger Strachan, calls them subpersonalities, the parts of the self, the greater mandala, that Carl Jung also explored. The mandala is wholeness. The mandala is the bigger picture, the unity of all the parts of who we are. The soul is the deepest aspect of who we are, and the subpersonalities, again, are the diverging parts that make up the whole. Let's hear from some people who are really adept at explaining this.
You're not a unitary thing, right? Like
you aren't a unitary thing.
Right.
And most of us, even though we know that, we still treat ourselves as unitary things, which is bizarre.
Yeah. When you cease to be taken in by your different selves and all these different modes, right, to the normal degree, then you can actually, then there's a kind of freedom to navigate to a kind of a happier conversation.
But there is some way in which what you're talking about is that one of your parliament of selves is your meta self, which you're probably getting as close to identifying with unitarity as anything else.
The psychodynamic model at its heart, right, which precedes Freud and Jung considerably, right? Like really the parts-based model goes back to the ancient Greeks at some level. Of course. The psychodynamic model is a rejection of the unitive bias. We all have this unitive bias that we are singular unitive beings, and that, but in fact, we know from a raft of scientific evidence and from, loads of anecdotal experience that people can share, that in fact what we are is a bunch of different forces or beings in a dynamic relationship to each other that all happen to mostly answer to the same name.
The way you're describing it, you've got sort of micro agencies at work. So what does the soul then become in that model? When I say John, what I'm deeply and most directly and ultimately pointing to is my soul.
Your Atman.
Yeah, or my soul in the Christian sense, I think.
Yep.
It's all about me that I identify with that is seeking salvation and some kind of integrated individual, non-divisible, non-dividable, right?
Yeah.
In Dr. Strachan's model, the soul is the life force, the being, the essence, the consciousness that drives intentionality into the subparts of who we are. Let's take a look at the basis of his model to see if we can add some extra needed context to the following exposition. We've established self. Self is the myriad of genetic forces. It's polygenic, meaning multiple variants of genes interacting together to create personality traits. Self.
Yes.
Okay? That's something that interacts with nature, and nature and nurture come together and create experience. Soul. Life force that directs self. The brain is the programmer, or the computer, that runs the program.
Let me stop you for 1 second. The soul utilizes all of us, all of our parts, our liver, our heart. For a long time, the heart was thought to be the soul. So the brain isn't any different than any other organ. So you don't want to see it in regards to be consciousness. Consciousness is in the soul and the parts of the self as it gets distributed. Right. The brain is running in areas that are reflexive all the way up to areas that are controlled.
Prefrontal.
So the brain does not work on itself without instruction.
For the last several months, my dad, Eric Holsapple, and I have been running a workshop called Living in the Gap. It's a leadership program designed to get people to live empowered, soul-directed lives. One of the main tools we've been using is Dr. Roger Strachan's self-soul-spirit model, in which you identify the subpersonalities and work with them so that you can be more aware of who you are and drive that soulful intention into your life. The presentation is called The Sacred Flip, the power of repurposing subpersonalities. It takes a look at how we can shift our perspective in such a way that honors who we are, but also allows us to adapt and create the desired habits and intentions that we want to manifest in our lives. Carl Jung called the soul the anima, or animus. The anima is the life principle. It's literally what animates, anima, animate. So life force, life energy animates us. It brings us to life. It gives energy to what we do and who we are. When you look at nature, it's just so obvious and apparent. For us as human beings, it gets convoluted because we have this beautiful capacity for abstract intellectualism that, while very important, has the tendency to disconnect us from that core life principle. I mean, just the sensation of just being a living thing is immensely incredible. You can't even, you just can't even compare it to anything. It's just like, whoa, there's energy happening. We get cut off by that for a lot of reasons. One of them is similar to what Sam and I think Ross shared, which is that we start thinking a lot. We have these complicated societal structures that we have to deal with from birth. And it's just always there, this social construct, this expectation. In Gestalt therapy, it's called an introject. It's something that comes from outside you and literally splinters into your psyche as an imposition of what you should or shouldn't be. So that definitely affects our sense of soul. It definitely affects our sense of life. It's necessary. We need society. It keeps us alive. We work together. There's a lot of great things about it, but the shadow side of society is it can cut us off from that essence, that natural sense of life force. So that now when I'm trying to reintroduce you to your own sense of soul, it's almost like it's an alien concept to some of you. Others might be more exposed to it for whatever reason. Is what I'm saying making sense so far? So life animates, anima. Life is what everything we're doing is just constantly ensouled. It's constantly given energy. It's constantly brought to life. And that's really what's happening with the subpersonalities. From a very early age, you've created coping styles, you've created ways of being that direct life energy as a way of, this is how I gotta survive, this is how I gotta live. And as we already went over initially, everybody's unique. So everybody's gonna do that a little bit differently. Why? Because genes wire brains, and brains are all cooked in a little bit differently, and everybody has a different life experience. So there's a lot of reasons why we experience different things. But what happens is by the time that we're in early childhood, we've already developed fixed ways of being. And those circuits strengthen over time. So depending on what you were exposed to in childhood, you developed a lot of coping styles and a lot of ways of dealing with life that are pretty much with you now. They're just with you. I mean, some of them you can change through the concept and the faculty of neuroplasticity, but also I want you to really understand that there is some fixed notion to all this. Like, you are who you are. I mean, your personality is essentially something unique. It can change, it can adapt, but don't expect to be a totally different person. Celebrate that you're a unique person. Celebrate the personality that you have instead of beating yourself up for it. Does that make sense? Okay, so I want you to start making connections between this whole concept of soul and what my dad has been teaching about life, just being. Being here, being present, be here now, living in the gap. I want you to start seeing the connections between those things. When we give attention to the soul, we have the opportunity to live in that gap. The soul's going to be there no matter what. It's going to be giving energy to something. Life is going to be going on. We have essence regardless of whether we're paying attention to it. But when we pay attention to it, it creates this interesting third space. And in that third space, there's wisdom. So that's what this is all about. Can you bring the attention to your life force and your life energy? And that brings me into the sacred flip. So why would we call it the sacred flip?
One thing before you go into?
Yeah.
Just what's just coming up for me is, being, soul, awareness. We're describing things that are indescribable and giving different names to something that may be all the same thing. None of us really know exactly what any of that is. And we're all going on our own exploration. Ryan's got me reading a book by a guy named Heidegger on being in time. That's just, going 500 pages of going into what these different things are. And Carl Jung was into this, treatise and just, but don't get hung up on not knowing exactly, being able to give an exact definition or put your finger on exactly what any of these terms are, because it's indescribable. Doesn't mean you just ignore it though, and not try to understand it and not trying to get at it. You come up with what it is for you and how you work with it. How you work with being, how you work with your soul, how you work with these things. Is that, anyway?
Yeah, you don't want to get too caught up in trying to figure out conceptually what I'm saying or what these terms, but if you can get a feeling, that's what I want you to sense, feel, kind of see what I'm saying, and trust your own intuition to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
So, absolutely.
And don't get hung up on it, is what I'm saying, on any one of the terms or,
right.
Because there are the brightest people in the world writing books and books and books, and you can read the whole thing and it still doesn't come out.
Neuroscientists
that's what it is.
Still haven't solved the what they call the mind-brain problem. This is an ancient philosophical problem. We have bodies and then we have minds. It's like the problem is we don't know where one ends and the other one starts. So this is one of the most ancient questions of history. So yeah, we're not going to nail it down decisively. But what we can do is get a sense for how amazing and connecting it is to be in that mystery.
And when you feel it at any given time, that's it.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean you need to be able to describe it at a cocktail party or a dinner or something to somebody else, because it's not easy. But if you feel it and you know it and you get it, it's like, oh,
right,
that's it. And later it'll be, that's not it. Oh, that's it, and that's not it. It's not. Anyway. It's a process, and it's really complicated, and it's really the most important work in life, in my experience.
So most people don't live soul-directed lives of intention. Most people live in a reaction to society that is pretty much driven by fear and just needing to stay aloof needing to stay afloat and survive. I mean, it's that simple. So when you ask these deep questions about purpose and how can I live a meaningful life, you're kind of in the minority. This isn't a question that most people are wrestling with. Or at least if they do wrestle with it, they suppress it. It comes up and then it's like, no, I'm not going to let that question sit there. The fact that you're here means that you're willing to ask that question. So that's huge. And what happens is, like I said, we get into these habitual states of being that are driven by our unique dispositions. And those dispositions create neural circuits that are habitual circuitry in the brain that make it more easy to act a certain way. So you have a set of neural circuits for each subpersonality. It's far more complicated than this, but just to be simple, that is running all the time, that is responding to life to accommodate and to manage. So the sacred flip is basically bringing soul to that process of how you're living your life and asking the question, what do I want to shift here? How do I want to manifest myself? And the ancient translation of sacrifice meant to make sacred. So I want to bridge that here a little bit. In order to make something sacred, to live a sacred soul-directed life, you have to make a sacrifice. That is a requirement of making something sacred. You're giving something up for something greater. And one of those things that you're sacrificing is ways of being and acting in the world. You're used to the way you're acting. You're used to the way you're being. You want to make a transformation. You want to shake things up. You want to really enhance your personality and live a soul-directed life. Then there's a lot of habits and a lot of ways of being that are going to be confronted with dying. They're no longer viable. So that's a sacrifice. Are you ready to make that sacrifice? Because that's one that's really tough for people. In order to get something new, you got to give something up. It's not just going to fall in your lap. You're not just going to wake up one day and I'm transformed. You got to put effort. You got to be intentional, and you got to be willing to make that sacrifice for the long term. So it's going to challenge your sense of safety, and it's going to be scary, and it's not always going to be easy, as you've already learned, as we all always learn as we're continuing to reflect on our lives. The other thing that you're giving up is other people's perceptions of you. I mean, I can't tell you how hard it is to change when other people want to keep you the same. Why? Because it scares the shit out of them. When they're like, oh God, Eric is like being really mindful and kind, and like he's supposed to be an asshole, and if he's changing, then what does that mean about me? Maybe I have to change. Oh, I don't want to change. I liked it better when you were an asshole. Go back to drinking, please. That happens all the time. I mean, go on a retreat, have a great transformation, and then just see how long it takes for your wife or husband to start an argument with you. And you're like, wait, I was just having such a great day, and now all of a sudden you were feeling horrible. Has anybody experienced that? Now, that doesn't always have to be the case, because if our partner or family is particularly self-aware, then in that moment, they'll see that and they'll be able to, like, oh, well, I'm not going to engage that way.
It's also why you be very careful on who you share things with, because it leaks power. You know, you don't have to share this with everybody in every conversation.
Yeah, there's no reason to share your deepest awakenings with people who aren't going to respect them. Don't cast your pearls before swine. That's a quote from Christ, obviously. That's a big deal. Don't do that. I mean, that can really squash you, trying to share something someone else won't understand.
The best saying, the cliche or whatever that I like the best, I came up with one of this is the more I work on myself, the better everyone else gets. I mean, it's not like everyone else has to be, if I'm really working on myself and getting it, then everybody else can be just like they are. It's fine. That's the way they are.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And I need to be able to deal with that.
So again, you're giving up a few things. You're giving up ways of being and acting, which is scary, threatens your sense of safety. And you're giving up the way that you're perceived by others. Again, that is not an easy thing. So you have to be asking yourself the question, how is my family going to respond to the new Nathan? Are they ready? Are they ready for everything I have to give? And how are you going to deal with getting slapped in the face when you open your heart? That sucks. But if they really love you, and if they're really your friend or really somebody that's worth being together with, then they will grow with you over time, and you'll just have to be patient and continue to say, hey, look, this is where I'm moving my life right now, and I really need your support. So you have to ask for what you need, and you have to be able to hold up a boundary and not bite the bait when somebody challenges your new sense of self. It's going to be really easy, and you know that will trigger self-doubt. And that self-doubt will basically say, oh, like this was never really real because look how easily it just crumbled in front of me. Has anyone experienced that? Yeah. That's not true. Don't buy into that crap. It is real. You know why it's real? Because it was a deeply profound experience that you had, and it's just not integrated into your brain fully yet. You're making it more real. So I always tell this to people who are getting sober or who are dealing with a new behavior. And I use the word relapse. Relapse means going back to the old behavior or going back to using it. But just think of it as behavior. Relapse is not a failure as long as you learn from it. The only failure, my favorite quote from Stalking Wolf, this Native American shaman who taught Tom Brown Jr., is the only failure is the failure to learn. That's it. The only failure is the failure to learn. So if you learn from something, it's a success. So as you're working with transforming and moving forward in these different life habits, patterns, ways of being, keep that in mind. If you have a slip up, if you feel like, oh crap, that's the challenger, he came back and told Colton to go fuck himself, oh no, what did I learn from that? Well, I learned that my sensitivity, if I take things too personally, I'll feel the need to defend myself, and then I'm more likely to, hit Colton across the face. But just because those moments happen where we have those slip-ups, those don't define us. Those are just expect them to come. They're like little reminders. They're like teachers on the path to remind us that, oh yeah, that's right. Like I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm human.
Say the trap is that you come up with the expectation that your partner, or your family, your friends, or anybody else has to change. If the only thing people you can deal with are enlightened beings, then your own personal transformation isn't that far. You think everybody else is a teacher, and you made this decision to go on a path and do some changes and do that. You're the one that decided that, and so your learning and your growth is, in large part, accepting everyone else just the way they are, and you are adapting. You're the one that can change and adapt and do those things. And sure, if you can have a positive impact on somebody and do those things and help them along the path, that's great. But the expectation that they do that is a real trap, and it can really defeat you. But can you deal with everybody else just as they are?
Yeah. Invitation, not expectation.
Yeah.
You can invite people to join you, but to expect it is setting you up for resentment.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so what makes these transformations possible? Well, let's look at it for a few minutes from a brain point of view. Again, dispositions are tendencies. So we're born with dispositions. They're proclivities to act, but those are not behaviors. Dispositions are not behaviors. Behaviors build off of dispositions. So any subpersonality has a lot of possibilities. The challenger can be a full enraged asshole, or he can be a real good friend. That's like, hey dude, like I'm really worried about you, man. You seem like really not okay right now. I just want to challenge where you're at because I want to make sure you're okay. And I've just seen you really slipping up or whatever. That's a totally different thing. So that's the same part operating in two different ways. There's very many ways that it can come into play. Is that making sense? Yeah. Okay. So neuroplasticity works in both ways. It can create habits that are difficult to change, but it can also create new habits. That's pretty cool. So it's difficult. Like, there's a lot of things that we have that are automatic, that are strong, but we also have possibilities for changing and growing new ways of being. So here's a quote from Norman Deutsch. He's a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, I think. He wrote a book, The Brain That Changes Itself. Plasticity is like snow on a hill in winter. If you are a skier, you can take many different paths down that hill on your first run because it is pliable, plastic, modifiable. It's human that if you had a good run, you may be tempted to take the same path over and over again. Dad loves a couple runs on the mountains he takes every single day. And soon you develop tracks in the snow, and soon ruts that are hard to get out of. The same applies in our lives. If we repeat things, they become habits. Well, that's pretty simple, but it's an important thing to think about. It's the more you do something, the more that you act a certain way, the easier it is going to be to act that way next time. And that can be good, and that can be shitty if it's ways that don't feel aligned with your purpose. So, neuroplasticity does have limitations. One of the criticisms I have towards new age thinking, which has a lot of great strengths, is this idea that there are no limitations. Well, no, you're not going to change the circuit responsible for urinating or things like that. So just there's a sense of working with who you are rather than expecting, like, oh, I'm not going to have a challenger anymore. So part of the sacred flip is flipping the perspective, making the sacred sacrifices of the old habits, and flipping the perspective to what's possible within the unique beauty of who I am. So next we're going to do payoffs. Okay, so this is really important. This is part of what you're sacrificing. You're sacrificing payoffs, and payoffs are essentially rewards that you're currently getting for your behavior. So I'm going to give you a couple examples here. Let's take Challenger. So Challenger, one of my subpersonalities. Let's take his old story. His old story was rage, flip out, over the top, anger towards others and towards life in general. So what were the payoffs for that old way of behavior? Well, one of the payoffs was as the challenger, I get control and I get to be angry. Now, this is one of the things that most people don't realize. People do what they want to do. It's just that when they say, oh, I didn't mean to do that, or what I didn't want to do that, what they really mean is there was another part of me that really didn't like that I did that. But the part of you that did it, I promise you, really wanted to do it. Okay? Do not fool yourself into thinking that you're somehow out of your own element and, oh, I just didn't know and I was tricked into thinking a certain way or being a certain way. You did it because you wanted to do it because that's what the challenger likes. He likes control, anger. That was his old story. 2, what's the secondary payoff? If the challenger is angry, he can avoid being authentic. If I feel uncomfortable and I use anger to mitigate that, I don't have to deal with the deeper, authentic emotions that other parts are feeling, and so I get to escape. Okay, so those are a couple examples of payoffs. Think of some other payoffs. Let's think of examples that are payoffs for, you can think of your own parts. Throw something out there of a payoff that you get for a certain behavior. That your soul would like to change, that your soul would like to transform.
For me, my part is righteous. and I get to be right. Payoff is I get to be right.
I get to be right. That's a pretty good payoff. See, we have to look at the positive as well as the negative. Getting to be right, that's the sacrifice, letting go of that. I mean, if I'm going to transform the righteous one, then I really have to let go of something I like in some ways. So, the challenger did not like letting go of the control. I'll tell you that right now. It was a sacrifice. Any other examples, please? I know I'm putting you on the spot, so.
I would say I have an opposite one there.
Okay.
Internal critic would sometimes keep me from doing something, so it keeps me from being wrong.
If I don't try, I can't be a failure.
Yeah.
So kind of a hesitancy to act. Right?
Yeah.
Let's do a couple more.
I have a competitor that the payoff is I get to win.
Great. Fantastic. Oops. Any others?
I have a compulsive driver.
Yep.
If I don't check the oven 100 times, I'm avoiding a fire in the house.
Oh, nice. Check the oven 100 times. No fire. That's a good payoff.
Yeah.
That is. No fire. Great. Okay, so what you can start to see here is that, and was there any more before? No? Okay, what you can start to see, and sorry if not everybody can see, what you can start to see here is that for everything that we do, there's something that we're getting out of it, okay? We're not victims of life. We're behaving in a way that is giving us payoffs. And so when people, they said, I don't know why I can't change, I don't know why I can't be different. Well, it's like, well, maybe you don't want to. Maybe there are payoffs that parts of you are getting that are rewarding you to a certain extent that makes it unattractive to change. Now, you're all here, so you're attracted to change. You're willing to make certain sacrifices, or at least I suppose you are. I mean, that's implied by the fact that you're here. So now let's talk about secondary payoffs. So secondary payoffs are perhaps just as or more important. A secondary payoff is where another part of you gets a reward from the way other parts, the primary parts, are behaving. So these are primary payoffs. Now let's talk about secondary payoffs. Okay, so let's go young boy. Wow, thanks for getting angry, challenger. I was scared and feeling sensitive that somebody might have been judging me. So your anger really helped me feel like safe and protected. Black hole. Wow, thanks for getting angry, challenger. Now I can beat myself up for what an asshole I am. Because I really like beating myself up as a black hole. Addict. Wow, thanks for beating up on me, black hole. Now I can go get fucking sloshed. That's great, because I don't have any reason not to, because I'm a piece of shit. So why not just tip the bottle back? So those are secondary payoffs. And those secondary payoffs, see, no part of yourself is an island. Every part of you is a interconnected dynamic system. So none of your parts act just alone. They're always acting and antagonizing what other parts want, or coordinating, or sometimes neutral, but we never act in a vacuum. So multiple complex rewards are built in to the old ways of behavior. And you can look at that from a brain perspective. You're literally getting reinforced neuromodulators releasing that are going to reward you for those experiences. Okay, now let's talk about parts that are sick of the situation. Lover. Wow. Challenger. When you act like that, you really cut. I really love people. I really want to connect with people. When you do that, it really cuts me off, and I really don't like it. I don't want to be that way anymore. Guide. Wow. When I do that, I really set a bad example for people, and I really want to help people in life, and I really want to leave a positive legacy. So when you act that way, it really bums me out. Let's even go to soul. Soul. My deepest purpose as a soul is to be present with and connected with others. And Challenger, when you do that, it just really fucks me up. It really gets me out of that state. And it's not okay. So now that's what's called examining the conflict. First you examine the payoffs, examine the conflict. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have a conflict in your life. Why would you come to the leadership program if there was no conflict? And look, maybe, I'll leave it out there that possibly you could just be here to celebrate. Life is so good, I wanted to come to Living in the Gap and celebrate. That's the one exception. Because my life is so awesome, why not spend a few hours with Eric Holzapfel here and there, okay? But that's probably not the case. I mean, maybe. If one of you is the exception, please tell me, and I will honor that. What's probably the case is you're here because there was a conflict in your life, and you saw the video or you heard it by word of mouth, and you said, maybe that could resolve that conflict. I don't know, give it a shot. And all the different parts that you started talking. Whoa. One of the parts probably said, are you sure you want to shake things, rock the boat? I mean, that's a big risk. Why would you want to change? There's a lot of payoffs that we're getting right now. And other parts when it said, yeah, maybe I can finally get to live the life as an entrepreneur, as a guide, as a friend, as a healer, all that stuff. Maybe I can finally get to live the life that I've always wanted to live because this amazing program is in front of me. So that's the conflict that I want you to start examining here today. Because what you're about to do tomorrow is map out your vision for the future. And you got to be aware of where you came from, what the old payoffs were, and what the parts of you that are sick and fed up are. I don't want to be that way anymore. I don't want to act that way. I don't want to feel this way anymore. I want to live my life in such and such a way. Okay. Now, secondary payoffs, just a couple more notes on that. I'll give you a good example. So you come home to your wife or your husband, and there's a part of you that really just had a long day and doesn't want to talk, wants to be alone. But instead of just saying authentically, hey, I'm just really screwed up. I just need like 30 minutes of quiet. I just spent 4 hours in a meeting and I'm just all fucked up. Instead of doing that, no, grumpy part starts being irritable asshole. Why? Because, well, maybe if I push her away or him away, then I can get the alone time I wanted. So parts are always acting that way. They're conspiring to meet that goal. And so, what you're getting in that situation is it's not authentic. It's a sneaky way of trying to get a need met. And you see that all the time. We do these sneaky bullshit things to each other. Instead of just saying what's real. Okay, it's been a long day. Just 30 minutes and I'll be ready for dinner. Why do we do that? Because people are afraid of authenticity. You can't hide behind anything. You have to take full responsibility for what you're asking for. So it puts you in this conflict with, am I really okay with the fact that I'm the type of person that just wants to be alone right now? Is that okay? Because you can lie to yourself and you can be the grumpy asshole and then your wife doesn't want to talk to you anyway and then you get what you want. But you know deep down, somewhere, you're like, I don't know, that wasn't right. They're automatic things that we just do, but that doesn't excuse those behaviors. The fact that we just do them. Does that make sense?
Did everybody here get you have automatic responses. Is everybody noticing that with themselves? That there's different situations, different people, different things that just trigger us, and we have just a conditioned response to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And awareness is the only hope of being aware of that, and at some point catching ourselves that this part is taking over, and
yes,
continuing on.
Yeah, we're up against a lot of habits and automatic ways of being that what we want is to set the bar so high that we can't get away with anything. It's like every way that we act is our responsibility, and just because it's automatic doesn't make it an excuse. It just means that we have a lot more work to do on that particular action.
So in the language that I'm learning is having a vision big enough that we don't allow that stuff. We've got a vision and a commitment big enough that we aren't going to allow ourselves this petty stuff to happen.
Right. And notice again the difference between asking for the 30 minutes and manipulating to get it. Notice that it's still okay to ask for the 30 minutes. Whatever part of you in this hypothetical moment that is saying it's not okay to have 30 minutes, the rejection of the need to have whatever you need to have is also one of the reasons why we conceal it and create conflict. So that's not going to resonate with everyone because everyone has different parts, but think for yourself, what are ways that you treat others to get your own needs met that are inauthentic? Does anyone have any examples they'd like to share?
I think I have one on here that's guide also. And I think that one in particular, the payoff is like being able to feel validated that I know something or shared something with someone, and I mask it by this, well, I'm just trying to help that person.
Got it.
Right. And so I think say your question again.
What parts of you are acting out in an inauthentic way to get needs met with others?
Right. I think that's an inauthentic thing, right? Because it's my own search for validation and trying to, it's not authentic because I say that I'm trying to help someone.
Right.
Right. When we've talked about it, the best way to help someone is sometimes to just listen and let them work it out.
Uh-huh.
Right? And so I'm not actually helping them the most effective way, right? But I continue to say that I am, but really it's a payoff for myself.
To feel validated.
Right.
So what part of you needs to feel validated?
The guide piece, the achiever.
Okay.
I don't know, there's probably several. There's some.
Good awareness.
Right, others. Some
Good.
Secondary ones, but.
Now, one thing to question there, I don't know your mandala well enough to say one way or the other, but is the guide the one who's looking for validation, or is the guide someone who just enjoys helping others, and another part is the one looking for validation? Because me, I'll just tell you my guide. My guide's not looking for validation, but there are other parts of me that are.
Right.
But you'll have to examine that for yourself.
Right.
To see what's true for you.
Well, it's just like your challenger is probably not looking for the 30 minutes.
No.
Right?
No, but I'll use them to get the 30 minutes.
Right.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to get you to see.
Right.
So the guide is a secondary. So this is what I call a hire. He's been hired to fulfill a need. Who hired him? I can tell you that the young boy hired the challenger for safety and protection. So the question is, who's hiring the guide to fulfill that need? Who's hiring your parts to fulfill needs? And they wouldn't say yes unless they wanted to. So the guide's like, yeah, I'll help you, buddy. I love helping people. You ask me for anything, no problem. I'll be the guide. So just notice how those dynamics work.
So becoming aware of these parts and letting the soul rise and direct the parts.
Yes.
Is the beauty of the model. The parts are all there, and absent when the soul exits, I mean, it's just chaos.
Free for all.
Right? It comes up wherever it triggers.
It's just automatic without the soul.
Right.
Without a conscious examination, it's just automatic.
But are you, this is are you willing to let the soul be the boss and hire the parts and note it, and you need awareness to do it, because we haven't been aware our whole lives. Right? We haven't been aware that there's so many different things going on. We're just probably aware that a lot of things don't work.
Absolutely. And that right there, that's why we did the exercises with getting into your soul first, is because your soul is the aspect, the energy that gives the parts life. So if the soul isn't awakened within you, the parts will just have life automatically. But if the soul is animating and you're aware of that and you're working with that, then you can start to direct energy to certain ways of being. And that is the key. That's the sacred flip. That's the transformation.
Can I get your perspective on something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like along the lines of authenticity. I guess I'm not convinced that being authentic in all situations would necessarily be the right thing.
Is that what your question is? Is that what your question is? Is if
I just kind of arrived at that.
Being authentic doesn't mean always saying what you think, but it does mean being in alignment with the parts of you and doing what you do for the right reasons. Being authentic doesn't mean being fully transparent at all times. And what being authentic means is, again, be aware of what's going on inside of you and act in a way that feels in a deep sense of connection with that awareness. So that's going to be context dependent, and that's going to be different no matter who you are, where you are. It's always going to be different what the right thing to do is in any given moment. The unexamined life is not worth living. Let's go back to Socrates, okay? Examine what you're doing and decide if what you're doing is something you want to continue or not. It's that simple. So there is no right or wrong answer to any of these questions. It's what you do with it that counts and how you do it. So I have to deal with the parts of me all the time. I mean, even in the last 3 minutes, I heard from Black Hole, I heard from Challenger, and I heard from Young Boy. Just in the last 3 minutes. And I could sit here and let this whole conversation go into automatic behavior if I examine it and say, oh, okay, Black Hole is concerned that I'm not good enough right now in this moment. Young Boy is concerned that Dad has a different opinion than I have. And Challenger wants to say, let's do it my way instead of anybody else's way. So you see how that just all happened in that last 3 minutes? What's the difference? I'm fucking aware of it. I just fucking told you. I mean, that's authentic. Now, I would not be in the grocery store in the checkout aisle and be like, my Challenger really doesn't like the way you just scanned my almonds. It's really bothering me. It's really concerning. No, I would never. Context is important, but in this context, for me to say, hey, Black Hole just tuned in. Ryan, maybe you're not teaching good. You're not good enough. Challenger and Young Boy, all in that last couple minutes. And those three for me, the Black Hole, the Challenger, and the Young Boy, they're the troublemakers. Okay, they're always up to something. They're creating some sort of negative spin on Ryan's life. And I'm really working to change that brain pattern over the last decade, and it's really been going well. It's really changed quite a bit because you can see it just even in this moment, I'm able to work through it without going into it. But it's hard, and that's what you're up against. I want you to find who's the troublesome crew in Mike. And
Angry Mike.
Right, Angry Mike, there you go. We all have our own dynamics that we need to work with. Okay, so we're almost done with this. Give me another 20 minutes and I'm going to send you out for the rest of the day on some exercises and we'll be here to support you. So, any questions so far before we move on?
Well, one quick thought or comment that's coming up for me is it seems like part of that awareness process is the ego part's coming up for me. It's like, why are you feeling the need to engage or not to engage? Like in this example, it's like having the awareness of, is it my philosopher that wants to have a positive, constructive conversation, or is it like an ego position where my pacifist side or peacemaker, whatever it was, is feeling affronted?
Wants validation.
Yeah, like you are disagreeing with me. So it seems like part of the awareness is like, why are you engage or not engage? Like, what is kind of driving that? Because some conversations, to your point, they're not worth having. Like to diffuse it and be the peacemaker, because you're going to have an arbitrary, subjective conversation for the next 20 minutes is like, that's also a good thing, right? I mean, it's if that's
it's all context
what's driving
it. Like it's like exactly. Your own self-awareness is what knows where it's coming from. Is it coming from a need for validation that's kind of surface level and I need to take the high road, or is it coming from a place of, I've spent my whole fucking life not saying what I think because I'm scared. And the biggest transformation for me in this moment is to say my opinion. That's huge. On the other hand, if you're somebody who is constantly feeling the need to defend themselves and be right all the time or save your opinion or look good in front of others, then maybe in that situation, the best thing you can do, the most transformational thing you can do is just silence. It's always dependent on who you are. And I think that if you really look within, you'll feel it. Like, it won't feel, if it's not right to just be the pleaser, it won't feel good. And that it'll feel kind of
soul.
Yeah, it won't feel soulful. It won't feel deep. Okay. Really good point, Mike. I think that's good question to hold in mind. Why do I care about this? What part of me is so invested in this particular situation?
So the two things to hold are the soul and how it feels in the soul, and how do they fit my vision? Right? What's the soul and the vision? To me, the two big things that would help guide.
Yeah. Okay, so you've been reading The Answer, which talks about programming the brain, and so I'm assuming that you have some background on that. So we're going to talk about subpersonalities as modes of attuning to the environment. So what you probably know by now is that the reticular activating system picks up on what's important and what's not important in your environment. Mm-hmm. In other words, your brain sees what's relevant to it as what is rewarding or what is threatening. And a lot of other things tend to be neutral. For example, we only see, I think it's 0.033% of the light spectrum. Why? Because there's a lot of irrelevant light that doesn't help us function. So for our parts, each part sees a world that is relevant to it. I'll give an example from one of my parts. When my teacher is awake and alive like he is right now, the world to him looks differently than when I'm in the mode of the boy or the philosopher, or if the teacher and the philosopher are close but they're different, or in the mode of the addict, the workhorse. So what's relevant to you in any given moment is really dependent on who's here, what part of me is here, and how has the brain been programmed to see reality. And one of the cool things about books like The Answer is that it shows you like, no. It's not that there's not things in your environment like opportunities, it's that you're not seeing the opportunities because your brain isn't filtering them as relevant. Mm-hmm. By the same token, the parts of you that are in the driver's seat at any given moment are seeing what's relevant to them. So the black hole, for example, sees reasons I'm not good enough. That is what the world is made up of. So every look to the black hole, everything that I encounter in my environment is interpreted through that lens. That's the world of the black hole. The lover sees, it's a lover of life, a lover of people. It's not just a romantic love. It sees moments of beauty, moments to share, moments to be with. It sees life through the perspective of appreciation. That's what it picks up on. Every part of me has that. The addict sees what's pleasurable. What around here is gonna feel good. That's what he sees. I would really feel good if I made them laugh. Let me see if I can get a laugh real quick, or whatever. So, what you program your parts to do for your life is gonna really program what you see, what you pick up on, what's important, what's not important, how the environment is going to be transacted with, how it's going to be translated into things that you can interact with. So understanding these modes of attuning to the world is very important. It's very important when you have a vision or a goal. Like tomorrow you're going to be focusing on your long-term vision, your long-term goals. When you have a long-term goal, the first step is you want to make sure it's soul-directed. Okay, so let's come up with an example. Let's say the entrepreneur says, I want to make 10 mil or whatever. Okay, great. Is that soul? Is the soul the deepest part of me saying, yes, that resonates, let's go for it. You got to get the thumbs up, okay? But examine what part of you is setting the framework for your life, and examine if it's connected to that bigger vision that you've been learning about here. Then you want to ask yourself, okay, so what parts of me, to accomplish this goal, do I need to put in the driver's seat and to ask to do things in order to fully come to this accomplishment? So it might be like, okay, so the workhorse is going to be responsible for putting the energy into the work. The entrepreneur is going to be responsible for coming up with the big ideas. The salesman is going to be responsible for keeping relationships and friendships going, for networking, stuff like that. So each of them is going to have their own way of being in the world, their own way of seeing, their own way of serving you. Then the sacred flip comes in. It's like, well, what parts of you aren't really ready? And those are the ones that you need to work with so that you are moving towards that goal. So, it's really not going to work for me to reach this entrepreneurial goal if the challenger is ruining sales or networking relationships. I mean, because then I'm sabotaging potential transactions, stuff like that. So then how do you work with the parts? Well, you know how to work with the parts because we've been over that. So I don't even know if I need to go over that again. But you work with the parts by getting into the dialogue and coming up with healing interventions and practices that allow you to sequence through whatever old story or feelings are happening for that part so that they can move forward. Now, there are some times when parts are not open to change. I only have one part of me that hasn't been open to change. Guess who?
Black Challenger.
Black hole. Challenger's working on it, man. Like he's come from full on fuck you all the time to like really dialing it back. Like he's really working on it. Black hole, he will not take any job I try to give him. I tried to be like, well, black hole, what if you were like the sacred griever? Like you really just appreciated sad moments. He didn't take that. I tried everything, and he just doesn't like anything that I have to give him, and he just keeps coming back to, no, dude, you're just a piece of shit. You don't get it. Like, you don't understand how deep your problem really goes. Like, you're the worst. So he's not... So what do you do with parts like that? You have to set boundaries, and I literally have to just say, black hole, shut the fuck up. Like, that's what I do. For some people who are less, the challenger is actually coming in handy there. But for some people who are less prone to aggression, they need to meditate, they need to visualize, they need to do whatever they can to shut down that bullshit. Because it's not serving me. So black hole, I don't know if he's ever going to change, but he isn't changing so far. He's the same guy he was, and he's doing the same thing. So what's the sacred flip of the black hole? It's just boundary. It's like if I notice he's renting space in my head, I'm like, all right, black hole, he's been here for a couple hours. I'm responsible as the soul to figure out what am I going to do to transform this energy. Does anyone else, do you have any parts of you that are like that just won't take?
I was looking. I don't know if it's... I haven't come up with it. Just looking at one that just hasn't... no, I can't say that I do have one that hasn't responded at all.
Well, that's awesome. That's fantastic. And if
if
all of your parts are willing to, if all of your parts are like ready for the soul's job, to follow the soul, then that is just amazing. Like, run with that. I've had to really work with the black hole and continue to disempower him. So the black hole is not going to serve me. I have to put up a boundary. Anybody else have parts like that you feel like are going to have a hard time following the soul?
The saboteur in me.
Okay, tell us about it.
I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've wanted to change or have tried to over the years have, I've gone maybe a good distance in trying to change, and then always end up back, I guess, reverting back to what we were talking about earlier too, or parts of it is like, well, I don't feel like it today. I've done well, Monday through Saturday. Today I'm just, Sunday I'm not gonna worry about that, the stuff that I want to change, and just go back to some of those old ways, and then I'll get back to it on Monday.
Yeah.
Or stuff like that, or it's like, I know I should be doing this, but I don't want to.
Right.
And then following that not wanting to path versus the path that's sort of been created.
Yeah.
So
yeah, got it. Yeah. So the more that you work with that saboteur and give energy to other parts, empower the loving, empower the expanding, empower the creative, empower the confident, the less the saboteur will have energy, but the more, usually typically what happens is those parts will try to get sneakier and find other ways to sneak in. So you have to be very vigilant and always be on the lookout for saboteur. But it's this, at the end of the day, it's really important to realize this. I was working with someone the other day, and they have a really strong black hole type of part. And I told them, I was like, go to your soul. And they said this. They said, I can't. Because the black hole had them by the balls so much that they didn't feel that they could even get into that true state of who they were. Now, I told them, I was like, that's bullshit. That's the black hole. I can't. That's great. Like that right there is such a debilitating belief. I can't even do it. I can't believe otherwise. I can't feel otherwise. I can't access another source of energy. No, you can. It's just really difficult sometimes. So that's the job of the soul. It's like the soul is the one who's responsible for where the energy goes in your system. And the more you meditate and the more conscious and awakened that you become, the more that you're going to have the power to be like, I can't. Like, no, black hole, I can't. I'm giving all my energy to the spiritual seeker today to meditate and learn and grow. You're not getting anything from me. And what will happen over time is those neural circuits will start to atrophy. Use it or lose it. If you don't use that circuit, it'll have less and less power. It'll still be there. It's probably very strong to this extent that it might be there for your life, that you'll have to deal with it for some people. But it'll get easier and easier. So there's a lot of hope there, Emron, if you really try, if you really work on it.
So can I go in just a second?
Yeah, please.
And most people have a part. It may not be called a saboteur, it may be called a victim, it may be called not enough, it may be called something. And it's a big one because in my experience, people are more afraid of success than they are failure. Success scares the hell out of us. it's like we're expecting failure. Oh yeah, well yeah, everybody told me it was gonna fail. So yeah, that's just been. But success, do I really deserve that? And you guys setting out some lofty visions or whatnot. It's something to watch. And that's why it's important to visualize it and be there. There can be that little thing in there that says, I don't really deserve that. And the saboteur or the victim or the not enough part just comes in and is watching. So awareness of that.
And it hones in on it too, and it's like it actively seeks for it.
So, but you've come a ways that now you're aware of it and you're willing to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, right? That's huge. The fact that you and I can sit here and talk about black hole and saboteur, dude, yeah, high five.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there may be, if it isn't got a willingness to look, there may be another part that Ryan has talked about, that can help guard it. Can say, hey, like my righteous part, I have to all the time say, well, what are you doing? Why don't you watch your own shit, and give that righteous part a job. So somebody to watch your sabotage or just to say, hey, keep an eye on this guy.
Yeah, so the soul is for being and the parts are for doing. So give the parts of you things, essences that you would like them to watch after. You want them to have a mission. And the black hole, again, is the only one that won't take a job. And so it's the other part's job to keep him dealt with, and the soul's job to keep him dealt with. And I also treat the black hole as my teacher. It's like, okay, well, if I'm stuck with this guy, then how can I learn from him? What can I learn from this continuation of criticism that I'm getting? So figure out for yourself what jobs do you need to give the parts of you to really live the life you want to live. And I want to circle back to something Mike shared earlier about this feeling of expectation, like I'm supposed to come out of this with something. And then you had this great insight that was something to the effect of, no, I'm just supposed to show up and be on the journey and bring my best, and what happens is what's right. Basically, is what I got out of it. That's big, because you don't want to live your life based on Eric Holsapple or Holiday or Ryan. You want to live your life based off of what's deeply meaningful to me. And if that is making a kick-ass business, then great. If that's going out into the woods and living in a cabin and, chopping wood, carrying water, there is no, who am I to say that that's not your soul-directed life? I'm not God. I don't have any corner on truth. So really trust yourself as you're mapping out your goals. What you want, not what... I know you all have someone's voice in your head.
And maybe more than one.
Oh yeah, I mean, you've got mom, dad, grandma, grandpa,
some
friend, teacher, all telling
coach
you
somewhere,
who you ought to be and how you're not. And the parts of you that are already critical or susceptible will cling on to those voices and repeat them in your head. So I want you to get all that shit out of your system. Name it. Oh, that's Dad. Dad wants me to do that. Or that's whoever. That's this part of me. Name it if it's see, you have to learn to realize the difference between a part and an interject, because a part is something that is just in you and always with you. An interject is something that really came in from outside. And some part of you clung on to it and said, yeah, we're going to keep running this tape over and over again. Teachers is a great example for me. There's some teachers that were just absolutely horrible when I was in elementary school, and the tape just kept running for a while. That's an introject. Be aware of those things. Give them a name. Always name it when it comes up. What part of you is clinging onto it? Whose voice is it? Get it out of your system. So here's your exercise.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah,
for
please.
The exercise. Can one of those voices be your own?
Well, yeah.
In the sense of almost like these self-imposed, all these things kind of combined, but without having taken time to identify your purpose and your vision and your intention and all these things. Like for me, I don't know that I have like I certainly am going to have some of my mom and my dad and all those things, but I don't have like a overarching one or two people. Some of it too just seems like it's my own thoughts and kind of defense mechanisms and things that I've built over the course of my life because I haven't maybe taken the time for some of this clarity and some of these 12 pillar type things. Can that be like a...
Yeah.
Or is it digging further to try and find some of the root cause? But
it's a really good question. So there's like the one part is there can be like a general voice of society that gets internalized, and it's just like it's just society. It's just like society is an interject. That the whole notion of being
that resonates with me.
So it's just society. But you have to be aware of like what parts of you really give a shit.
Yeah.
Because like, so remember the very basics that when I taught this the first time, everything is attraction and connection. If something comes in and clings on to me, it's because some part of me was resonating with that message. And whether it's a part of me that feels vulnerable and not good enough, so it clings on to criticisms, or it's a part of me that likes certain things that society says, whatever, it's all attraction and connection. Dr. Strachan often talked about when they were first running tests on the AIDS virus in the 80s, I believe, there were certain people who they would get exposed, but they wouldn't get it. They wouldn't get the virus. Why? Because there was nothing in their system biologically that could cling on to it. Same thing happens with cancer cells. It's like some people are just more susceptible to certain things than others. So whatever clings on to you, there's something inside of you that grabbed it. He always says, you can't be rejected if you're not rejectable. You can only be rejected if you have a part of you that's rejecting itself. So that is key. Remember that. What parts of you are taking these things on? So the interject, the part that took on the interject, the soul, what the soul wants, that's the sacred flip. Flipping from society-directed life to soul-directed life. Really asking yourself, like Emmanuel Kant's enlightenment, what do I want? Who do I want to become? What's the truest for me? Get that sense of energy that we explored. Practice that. Run your life from that place. Your first exercise, unless there's any pressing questions.
I'll do one thing before you do that. It's just, and then for living your life of your dreams and your vision is can you look internally for your approval? I can tell you that in any kind of leap you got to make, if you're looking out there for what I do, you're going to miss some great things. But if you can look inside and get into your soul and say, what should I do? And take it from there, regardless of what society that voices have. And it's that disassociation from the mind that Eckhart Tolle says, the disassociation from thoughts or minds from the voices. I notice them coming up, but I'm residing somewhere else. I notice them, thanks for sharing, that was good information, or it wasn't good information, thanks for sharing, and can I come back to that soul-driven thing and just go, I should do this, or this is not the time. It's not right for my family, or whatever it is, to come from that place deep here. And it's fine to talk to other people and get opinions and all those kind of things, but can you look in the final analysis of, I'm okay. Let's do this. Whatever it is. This is what this is offering. It's huge for any kind of vision completion. It's your vision, and you're going to have times there when you just dive in and identify and go, it's going to be all right. Let's go.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks for hanging in there. I know some of you are getting tired from sitting so much. So the first exercise is I want you to envision from your soul your being and potential. And how are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to put some really nice music on, and you can bring out your vision board. I want you to feel free to draw, to write poetry, to meditate, whatever medium you need to use to feel like you're accessing this state. But what I want you to do is look into your highest potential. I want kind of like a shamanic journey, like we've done a few times in this program. Go out to the best version of yourself somewhere out in the future, and I want you to almost have a conversation with that person. But I don't want you to get caught up in details like, well, I drive a Ferrari and I, work this job and this is how I did it. No, that's not what I'm asking. You'll get into those details tomorrow. What I'm asking is, what does it feel like to be you, this potential self? Not what you have, but what's it like to be the best version of you? And that's really going to come through as emotions, sensations, and images. So I want you to let your mind wander. Take out your vision board, gaze at it. Allow that amalgamation of images to become like a fluid, moving thing in your heart. Like let it take on its own personality. And and let your soul get in dialogue. Write a poem, draw a picture, close your eyes and imagine. Stay awake though. Don't fall asleep. This is your life we're talking about. I mean, focus. This is important. I want you to really get the most out of this that you can. So really you're only limited by your imagination, but the only rule is don't get into what you have and focus on the state of being, the feelings and the sensations and the images. And just play with those images for, let's do, I want to give you a lot of time for this. I want this to be like a deeply nourishing thing for your soul. So I want you to take 30 minutes to just do that. And just stay right here. Just stay in this room. I'll turn off the lights. I'll put on some peaceful meditation music.
Thank you everyone for watching this video with Sorting Myself Out. My name's Ryan Holsapple. Please hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell if you are enjoying what you're getting here and you would like to help us continue to spread the word. Also, you can donate with a link in the description below. Thank you very much.